Hello, friend. Welcome back. If you're just finding us for the first time tonight, I'm so glad you're here. Get yourself comfortable. Pull your blanket up a little higher if you need to. Maybe turn down the lights, or let them stay low the way they already are. There's no rush tonight. There never is here. This is your time, your quiet, your rest, your gentle slide towards sleep. Tonight I want to tell you a story. A true one. My own. It's the kind of story that took me a long time to be ready to share, not because it's painful, though parts of it are, in the softest, most bittersweet way, but because it felt too precious to put into words. Like if I spoke it out loud, some of the magic of it might dissolve. But I've come to believe the opposite is true. I think some things become more real, more solid and lasting, when we finally say them. And so tonight, I'll say this one to you. I found a letter my father wrote before he passed. And what happened after I found it? What it did to me, what it opened up inside me. That's what I want to tell you about. So close your eyes if you'd like, or let them rest soft and unfocused on whatever is in front of you. Breathe slowly. I'll be right here, telling you this story gently, the whole way through. My name is Daniel. I grew up in a small town in central Ohio, the kind of town that doesn't make the news and doesn't try to. The main street had a hardware store, a diner called May's that smelled like coffee and butter from half a block away, a tiny library with a hand-painted wooden sign, and a post office that was only open until noon on Saturdays. The houses in our neighborhood were old but kept up well. People raked their leaves and shoveled their walks. They waved from across the street. They brought casseroles when someone got sick. Our house was a pale yellow two-story on Elm Creek Road, not on the creek itself, which was about a mile further west, but close enough that in the spring when the windows were open, you could sometimes hear it. The yard had 2 big maple trees in the back and a flower bed along the front that my mother kept full of something from April until October. Tulips in the spring, black-eyed Susans in the summer, mums in the fall. She had a system. I never fully understood it, but I always appreciated it. The way the front of our house was always quietly, reliably colorful. I was the middle child of 3. My older sister Claire was 4 years ahead of me, and my younger brother Marcus was 3 years behind. We were close in the way that siblings who grow up in a calm house are close. Not dramatically, not with a lot of decorations, but steadily. We knew each other's rhythms. We shared a bathroom without too much trouble. We watched movies together on Friday nights without anyone making it into a big deal. My father's name was Robert. Most people called him Bob. He was a quiet man in the best sense of that word. Not withdrawn, not cold, but genuinely at ease with silence. He worked for the county as a civil engineer, which meant he spent his days thinking about roads and bridges and drainage systems. He drove a grey pickup truck. He wore the same style of flannel shirts from October through March every year, plaids in dark reds and greens and blues. He liked baseball, specifically the Indians, though he watched their games with the same calm acceptance, whether they were winning or losing. He made very good scrambled eggs. He kept a small vegetable garden in the far back corner of the yard that produced more tomatoes than our family could ever eat, and so every August he would fill brown paper bags with them and leave them on the neighbors' porches without announcement. He wasn't the kind of father who talked about feelings very much. Not because he didn't have them. I know now, with the certainty that only comes with time, that he had very deep feelings. But he came from a generation and a family that expressed love through action, through presence, through showing up, through the scrambled eggs, through coaching Marcus's little league team for 4 years even though he worked long hours, through driving me 2 hours each way to a college tour when I was 17, just the 2 of us, and buying me a grilled cheese at a diner along the highway, and asking me careful, thoughtful questions about what I wanted my life to look like. He wasn't the kind of father who said I love you every day. But he was always quietly there. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 31. By then I had moved to Columbus, about 90 minutes from home. I had a small apartment on the third floor of an older building, a job in urban planning that I found genuinely interesting, and a cat named Wendell who was grey and opinionated and liked to sleep on my feet. My life was quiet and good, in the ordinary way that a life can be good without being remarkable. The diagnosis came in February. My mother called me on a Sunday evening. It was already dark by 5 o'clock the way it gets in Ohio in February, and I was sitting on my couch with Wendell, in my lap and a bowl of soup on the coffee table, half watching something on television. When she said the word cancer, the room felt very still. I remember the sound of my own breathing. I remember looking at the lamp across the room and focusing on it for a second, just to have something steady to look at. Pancreatic cancer is fast. I think most people know that now, but when you hear it about your own father, it becomes a different kind of knowledge. It moves from something you understand in your mind to something you feel in your chest. The doctors said he had somewhere between 6 and 12 months, depending on how he responded to treatment. He responded quietly, the way he responded to everything. He tried the treatment, tolerated it without much complaint, and continued driving his grey truck to work until he couldn't anymore. I came home most weekends after that. The drive from Columbus to my parents' house was almost exactly 90 minutes on a good day, north and then west through flat farmland, past grain silos and water towers and the occasional wind turbine. I came to know that drive in a different way than I ever had before. It became meaningful. The exit signs, the particular way the light fell across certain fields in late afternoon, the radio station that faded in and out around the 40-minute mark. I drove it in rain and in sunshine, and in the soft grey light of overcast Ohio, days that feel like the sky has pulled a blanket over itself. During those visits, my father and I did ordinary things. We watched baseball games even in the off-season, looking up old games online when there were no current ones to watch. We went to Mays for coffee, sitting at the counter if the booths were full, talking about my work or the neighbors or the state of the county roads. He had opinions about road infrastructure that I now find deeply comforting to remember. Strong, considered opinions about drainage and patching schedules and the particular ways that different municipalities handled winter maintenance. Sometimes we would sit in the backyard in the afternoon, even in the cold, because he liked being outside. He would have a blanket over his legs and a thermos of coffee, and he would look at the yard with a kind of peaceful attention, the way you look at something you know you're going to miss. We didn't talk about dying very much. Not because we were avoiding it exactly, but because it didn't seem like what either of us needed. What he needed, I think, was to still be himself. To still be Bob who knew about roads and liked the Indians and made scrambled eggs on Sunday mornings when I slept in the guest room. What I needed was to be his son. Just his son, for as many weekends as we had left. He passed in October of that year, on a Thursday afternoon. I was with him. My mother and Claire and Marcus were there too. It was a calm passing, in the hospital room that had become familiar to us over the previous weeks. The window had a tree outside it, and the leaves were just beginning to turn. He went quietly, which somehow felt right. Like a candle going out in a room that stays warm for a while afterward. Grief is such a patient thing. I had expected it to be loud, immediate, crushing. And some of it was. The first week was hard in ways I won't try to describe tonight, because this isn't a story about the hard parts. Those passed, the way hard things do, slowly and then more slowly, and then one day you realize they've shifted into something softer and different. Something you carry rather than something that carries you. By the following spring, I had settled into a kind of quiet, functional sadness that just lived alongside me. I went to work. I came home to Wendell. I called my mother on Sunday evenings. I drove out to visit every few weeks. And my mother and I would have dinner and watch television together and sometimes go through old photographs, which was comforting in the way that photographs of happy times are comforting, bittersweet, like pressing a gentle thumb on a bruise that's mostly healed. It was in May, about 7 months after he passed, that I found the letter. My mother had asked me to come out for a long weekend to help her go through some of my father's things. Not all of it. She wasn't ready for all of it. And I want to be clear that we weren't dismantling his existence. It was more that there were practical things, boxes in the basement and a corner of the garage, paperwork and old files that needed to be looked through, organized or recycled or passed on. My mother is a practical woman and she was ready, in her way, to begin that part. Claire would come for a few hours on Saturday, and Marcus was going to call in the afternoon, but most of the looking through would be me and my mother. I drove out on a Friday evening. It was one of those May evenings in Ohio that remind you why spring exists. Warm enough for a light jacket, the air smelling of fresh grass and something blooming in someone's yard nearby. The maples in the backyard had leafed out fully and were that deep, particular green of early summer. My mother had already planted the flower bed, tulips fading, early summer things coming in. The house looked exactly like itself. She made soup for dinner, the chicken and vegetable kind that she's made my whole life, and we ate at the kitchen table and talked about ordinary things. She was doing well in the realistic sense. She had her routines, her friends from church, her garden. She was not pretending to be fine. She missed him deeply. She said so plainly that she was moving through her days with a kind of quiet courage that I found both admirable and heartbreaking. After dinner, I went to bed early, in the guest room that used to be my room. The window looks out over the backyard, and I could see the maples in the fading light. I lay there for a while, not sleeping, just breathing, listening to the neighborhood sounds. A car passing now and then, a dog barking once far away. Weaned through the maples, the house settling. I fell asleep to those sounds the way I used to when I was young. We started in the basement on Saturday morning. My mother had coffee made and the windows open a crack because it was going to be a warm day and she wanted to get the air moving early. The basement was finished, carpeted, the kind of basement that doubles as a family room and a storage space and a catch-all for things without a better home. There were bookshelves along one wall, a filing cabinet in the corner, boxes labeled in my father's handwriting, neat, all capitals, the handwriting of someone who drew site plans for a living. We went through things slowly. This is one of the things about grief that nobody tells you, or maybe they tell you, and you don't fully understand until you're in it. That going through a person's belongings is not sad in a relentless way. It's more like a tide. You'll be fine for a while, sorting through old tax returns or looking at a box of cables for electronics long gone, and then you find something, a grocery list in his handwriting, or a baseball cap worn soft at the brim. And the tide comes in, briefly, fully, and then goes back out. And you keep sorting. We found a lot of ordinary things. Old tools that Marcus said he wanted. Paperwork going back decades, most of which we recycled. A box of VHS tapes. An old radio that my father had kept meaning to fix. A coffee can full of screws and nails organized by size, which made my mother laugh softly and shake her head. Around noon, I opened a box in the corner that was labeled, simply Office Misc. It was one of those banker's boxes, the kind with the removable lids. Inside were things from his desk at the county office. A stapler, some pens, a paperweight that was a clear, acrylic block with a small survey marker embedded in it, the kind of thing that gets given as a gift at a retirement party or a work milestone. There were a few folders of old work documents, a notepad, a coffee mug that said World's Okayest Engineer, which I recognized. Claire had given it to him as a joke, and he had kept it on his desk for years with complete sincerity. Beneath all of that, At the bottom of the box was a plain white envelope. It was sealed. On the front, in my father's all capitals handwriting, it said, "For Daniel." I sat down on the carpet. I didn't plan to. My legs just found the floor. My mother was across the room going through a different box, and I sat there for a moment, just holding it. This envelope, feeling its slight weight, the faint crinkle of it. My name in his handwriting. For Daniel. Not Danny, which was what he usually called me when I was a kid, and not Daniel, which was formal, but just Daniel. Like he'd thought about it. My mother looked over and saw my face. She came and sat next to me. I showed her the envelope. She looked at it for a moment, and then she put her hand on my arm and said, "Take your time, sweetheart. Take all the time you need." She went upstairs to make lunch and gave me the room. I sat there in the basement for a few minutes before I opened it. The carpet was a little rough under my hands. Light came in through the small basement windows along the top of the wall, that softened underground light. I could hear my mother moving around in the kitchen above me. The sound of a drawer, water running, her soft footsteps. The house sounds. The alive sounds of a house. I thought about my father writing this letter. I tried to picture it. When he had done it, where he had been sitting, what the light had looked like. I wondered if he had written it at his desk at the county office, or at the kitchen table at home, or somewhere else entirely. I wondered how many times he had started and stopped. Whether it had come out in one sitting or over several. I wondered if he had felt like himself while he was writing it, or if he had felt like someone standing at a distance from himself, watching his own hands move. Then I opened it. The paper inside was standard notebook paper, 3 pages, folded in thirds. His handwriting, that neat, deliberate, all capitals style, covered most of both sides of the first 2 pages and about half of the third. I unfolded it carefully, the way you might handle something fragile. Even though it wasn't fragile, it was just paper. But it felt like it deserved that care. I'll tell you what it said. I've read it enough times that I know it almost by heart, and I've thought a long time about sharing it, and I think my father would be all right with me sharing it here, gently, the way I'm doing now, because I think he wrote it to be known. I think that was part of the point. He started with my name. Daniel, it said, at the top of the page. No, dear Daniel, no to my son, just my name, the way he said it when he wanted my attention in a quiet room. He wrote that he had been sitting with the idea of writing this letter for a few months and kept not doing it, not because he didn't know what he wanted to say, but because he wasn't sure he could say it the right way. He said that he had never been good with words the way some people are good with words, that he'd always been more comfortable with diagrams and numbers, and the kind of problems that have definite solutions. But he said he wanted to try, because there were things he needed me to know, and he wasn't sure he would find the right moment to say them out loud. He wrote about the day I was born. He said it was a cold November morning and he had driven my mother to the hospital in the dark, and that when the doctor told him he had a son, he had stood in the hallway outside the delivery room and cried, for the first time since he was a small child. He said he hadn't expected to cry. He said he wasn't sure what had come over him, except that he understood, suddenly, that his life had just become about something larger than himself, and that it scared him and amazed him at the same time. He wrote about watching me grow up. He mentioned specific things I had forgotten, or half forgotten, things that lived in the soft blurred part of childhood memory. He mentioned a science fair project I did in 5th grade about weather patterns, which he said he had thought about for years, because of the careful way I had organized my data. He mentioned a summer when I was about 13, and had decided I wanted to learn how to cook and had made a different dinner every Friday night for 2 months, some of which were good, and some of which were, in his words, ambitious. He mentioned driving me to Columbus when I was applying for my first real job, how I had been quiet the whole way there, and how he had not pushed me to talk, because he could see I was working through something in my own mind. He said he had been proud of me in that moment, watching me manage my own anxiety, watching me hold myself together and go in and do the thing I needed to do. He wrote that he had not been the kind of father who said the right things. He said he knew that. He said he hoped I knew that the words were always there, behind everything. Behind every baseball game watched together, behind every Sunday breakfast, behind every drive and every awkward hug goodbye in the driveway. He said he loved me in every flannel shirt, and every cup of coffee and every question he had ever asked me about my life, and he was sorry if that was ever unclear. He wrote about something he had been thinking about since the diagnosis. He said that the one real regret he had, not about his life, which he said he felt had been a full and lucky one, but the one thing he wished he had done differently was to tell us, Emmy and Claire and Marcus, more directly, more plainly, that we were everything. That raising us was the best thing he had ever done. That watching us become people real, full, complicated people with our own ideas and our own lives had been a wonder to him. That he had watched all three of us from a quiet distance and felt every day something that was too large and too warm to be called pride exactly, though that was the closest word he had. He wrote a few specific things for me, particular to me. He said he thought I was the most inward of the three of us, the most likely to process things alone, and that he had sometimes worried that I was too hard on myself, that I held a standard for myself that was harder than what I would hold for anyone I loved. He said he hoped I would learn to be as patient with myself as I was with others. He said this was advice he had maybe also needed, and had not always taken. He wrote that he was not afraid. He said it simply, without drama. I am not afraid, Daniel. I have had a good life. I love your mother more than I know how to write down. I love you and your sister and your brother. Whatever comes next, I feel ready. And I don't want you to worry about me after I'm gone. I want you to go live your life with both hands. The last line of the letter was, you have always been enough. More than enough. More than I deserved. And then his name, Dad. I don't fully know how long I sat there in the basement. Long enough that the light through the small windows shifted. Long enough that I heard my mother come to the top of the basement stairs once and then, without saying anything, quietly go back to the kitchen. She understood. She has always understood, my mother. When to come and when to give space. I cried, of course. Quietly, the way I do most things. I sat on the basement carpet with the letter in my hands and I cried. And it was not the sharp, desperate grief of the early months after he passed, but something different, something softer, something that felt almost like relief. Like hearing something I had always suspected, but had never had confirmed. Like a question I hadn't known I was carrying suddenly having an answer. You have always been enough. More than enough. I thought about all the years I had spent being uncertain of that. Not in an extreme way. Nothing that had kept me from functioning or being happy. But in the small, quiet way that I think a lot of people carry a low, background hum of not quite enough mess. The sense that you could be doing better, being more, trying harder, achieving something larger. The voice that compares and measures and finds you slightly wanting, not in a cruel way, but in a persistent, low-grade way that never fully goes quiet. And here was my father, who had never been a man of many words, who had expressed love through scrambled eggs and baseball games and careful questions about my life. Here he was telling me, in his neat all capitals handwriting, on standard notebook paper, that I had always been enough, that I was more than he deserved. The weight of that was enormous and also, somehow, very light. Like something being set down. I brought the letter upstairs. My mother was in the kitchen, and she had made sandwiches and there was more coffee, and the kitchen was warm and smelled like bread and the leftover traces of the morning soup. She looked at me when I came in, and I could tell she had been waiting, not anxiously but patiently, the way she waited for everything. I sat down at the kitchen table and I asked her if she knew about the letter. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. She said yes. She said he had written it sometime in the spring, when he was still feeling relatively well, and that he had told her about it. Not what it said. He wanted that to be just for me, but that it existed. She said he had put it in that box in the basement himself, labeled the box himself, and told her it was there. She said she had wondered when I would find it. I asked her why she hadn't told me it was there. She thought about that for a moment, and then she said, "I thought you'd find it when you were ready to find it." She smiled a small, quiet smile. "Turned out to be May," she said. I thought about that. Turned out to be May. I had opened that box in that basement on that particular Saturday morning in May, with the maples in full leaf outside, and the tulips fading in the flower bed, 7 months after he had passed. 7 months of grief and adjustment and the slow, patient work of learning to live alongside loss. And there at the bottom of a box marked OFFIC was a letter that said, "I was enough." It felt perfectly timed. Not planned, exactly, or maybe planned in the loosest sense. He had put it there. He had told my mother he had left it to find. But the timing of my finding it felt like something else. Like readiness. Like the letter and I had needed those 7 months, separately, before we were prepared to meet each other. After lunch, Claire came over, and I showed her the letter. She read it sitting at the kitchen table, and she cried quietly, and then she asked if there was one for her and Marcus. My mother shook her head gently. There wasn't, not that I ever knew of. Maybe he had run out of time, or maybe he had said what he needed to say to them in other ways. I don't think it mattered. What he had written for me felt like it was for all of us in a way, the specific details aside. The love, the gratitude, the wish that we would go live with both hands. That was for all 3 of us. That evening, after Claire had gone home and my mother had gone to bed early with a book, I sat on the back porch for a while. The May evening had cooled down and there was a light breeze moving through the maples. The sky was the deep dark blue of late spring nights. And there were stars. Not as many as you'd see further out in the country, but enough. The neighbor's porch light was on, a warm amber glow across the fence. Somewhere, a little distance away, I could hear the creak. I had the letter folded in my pocket. I wasn't reading it. I had it nearly memorized by then. But I wanted it close. I sat in the porch chair that had been my father's chair, and I just breathed the night air and listened to the car, maples and the distant creek and the ordinary sounds of an Ohio spring night. And I thought about what it means to be loved by a quiet person. I thought about how much of his love had always been there, in the fabric of my daily life growing up, so woven in that I had sometimes not been able to see it as a distinct thing. The way you can't always see what's closest to you. The scrambled eggs, the drives, the patient questions, the years of showing up, the way he had watched me, quietly, from a distance, and felt something too large to be just called pride. I thought about what he had said about being inward, about being hard on myself. I turned that over slowly, the way you turn over something smooth in your hands. He had seen that. He had looked at me all those years, and seen that particular quality, the self-held standard, the background hum of not quite enough. And he had named it in his letter, gently, with no judgment, just with the hope that I would be kinder to myself. That was the most personal thing in the letter. That was the part that felt like it had been written from the deepest knowing of me. I sat on that porch for a long time. I thought about my father driving to work in his grey truck, all those years of mornings. I thought about him in his vegetable garden in August, filling brown paper bags with tomatoes. I thought about him at his desk at the county office, surrounded by site plans and drainage maps, and at some point sitting down with a piece of notebook, paper, and writing the most personal thing he had probably ever written in his life. I thought about him folding it carefully into thirds, and sealing the envelope and writing my name on it in his neat all capitals hand. I thought about how much courage that must have taken, for a man who showed love through doing rather than saying. To sit down and say it plainly. And I felt grateful. Deeply, quietly, lastingly grateful. That was 3 years ago now. I've read the letter many times since. Not obsessively. I don't take it out every day, or even every week. But sometimes, when the background hum gets loud, when I find myself measuring and comparing and holding myself to that too hard standard he named so gently, I'll get it out. I keep it in a wooden box on my bookshelf, next to a small photograph of him in the backyard, standing by his tomato plants, looking at the camera with that expression he had that was not quite a smile, but very close to one. I'll unfold it and read it in whatever light is in the room, and I'll hear his voice in the words. Not a voice he ever quite used out loud, but his voice nonetheless. The real one. The one underneath. And I'll feel, again, that gentle settling. That sense of being set down. That quiet confirmation. You have always been enough. Becoming a person after losing a parent is a strange and layered thing. They're still there. In the ways that matter. In the habits you developed because of them. In the values that were built in that yellow house on Elm Creek Road. In the particular quality of your love. The way you show up for people. The things you do rather than say. The tomatoes you bring to neighbors without making it a big deal. My father is in all of that. He always will be. And now he is also in that letter. That careful, deliberate, 3-page letter that took him a long time to write. And found me in May, when I was ready. When the maples were full and the tulips were fading and the creek was running and I was finally, in my own quiet way, ready to hear it. I think about the people in my life now. The ones I love, and I try to be a little more like that letter. A little more willing to say the thing plainly. A little less reliant on the scrambled eggs and the drives and the showing up, though I believe deeply in those things too. I try to add the words. To close the gap between what I feel and what gets said. Not dramatically, not in long speeches or grand moments. That's not my nature, and it wasn't his either. But in small, deliberate moments. A note. A call that doesn't have a specific reason. The courage to say, I see you. I am proud of you. You have always been enough. I think that's what his letter taught me, most of all. That it is never too late to say those things. And it is also never too early. So friend, as you lie there in the dark or the soft dim light of wherever you are tonight, I want you to think for just a moment about who has loved you quietly. Who has been there in the fabric of your life, so woven in that you might not always see it clearly. The person who drove you somewhere without being asked. Who made the food you liked. Who sat beside you without needing to fill the silence. Who watched you from across the room and felt something too large to name. And let yourself feel, just gently, that you are enough. That you have always been enough. Whatever voice tells you otherwise, and most of us carry one, let it be a little quieter tonight. Let my father's all capitals handwriting cover it up. Just a little. You have always been enough. More than enough. The night is soft around you. The world is quiet in the way it gets when it's resting, when the day has done what it was going to do, and now there is just this, the dark, the warmth, the slow tide of your own breathing. Somewhere, a light is on in a neighbor's window. Somewhere a creek is running. Somewhere, maples are moving in a gentle wind, their leaves catching whatever light there is and letting it go. Let yourself be still now. Let your thoughts settle, the way sediment settles in still water. Slowly, without effort, until everything is clear and quiet and resting at the bottom. You don't have to figure anything out tonight. You don't have to become anything or do anything or prove anything. You just have to breathe. In, slowly, and out, slowly, and the night will do the rest. There is a letter somewhere with your name on it. Maybe it's been written already, folded and waiting in a box you haven't opened yet. Maybe it will be written someday. Maybe the person who feels it most has never put it into words and might not ever. But the love itself is there. It is woven in. It is in every quiet thing that has ever been done for you. Every presence, every showing up, every time someone made you scrambled eggs or drove you somewhere, or sat beside you in a backyard, looking at the maple trees, not needing to say a word. That was love. All of that was love. And you are held in it, even now, even in the dark, even in your rest. You are held. Sleep now, friend. Gently. The night is long and soft, and there is nowhere else you need to be. Just here, just breathing, just held. Good night. True tales for dreamers, new stories every day. Sleep well.